It's like preparing for an exam. Greetings and good day to you all with us here for this interview, where I'm going to be, one second. Greetings and good day to you all. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Jimi Sayo, and this is an interview as part of the PCOS Summit series. PCOS stands for Polycystic Ovary Syndrome. I never presume that people know what all the acronyms are. And the PCOS Video Summit is a summit that features over 25 experts in different areas of life, sharing with you their insights as to either how they have been able to overcome issues of PCOS or similar to PCOS, or how they help others to resolve these issues. The whole theme of the summit is how to feel amazing in mind and body, even if you have PCOS. Before I go on further and introduce our speaker for today, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. My name, as I said, is Jimi Sayo. I come from Nigeria in West Africa. I live in London, United Kingdom, and I'm a hypnotherapist and a neuro-linguistic practitioner, also known as NLP. I'm also a certified havening practitioner, and havening is something which I do believe is going to become more of a household name, but it's a great way of dealing with anxieties, phobias, and things like that. Very quickly, before I became a hypnotherapist, I did a bit of teaching. I was a proofreader and sub-editor for a while, which was in the good old days when computers didn't have spell check and everything. So people like me were needed who knew where the commas and apostrophes should be. I've also got a public relations and marketing background, and I've got an MBA in digital technology management from Helsinki Business School. As a health and wellness coach, I've come across women that would come to me for help with weight loss. And I'd always hear the same things from these women. They'd say to me, but I've got PCOS. And initially, I didn't know what PCOS was, but I did wonder, what is this thing that each of these ladies almost whispers the words with dread? What is it all about? So I set about on a journey of discovery to find out about it. And, you know, boy, oh boy, I thought I knew a lot about PCOS until I gathered all the experts together and found out just how much information there is there. To give you a bit of an idea, some of the things that a person with PCOS has to live with includes insulin resistance, which gives them a risk of getting type 2 diabetes, and also issues with weight gain. There are quite often infertility issues related to this. PCOS is the highest cause of infertility amongst women. It gives acne and other skin conditions, male pattern balding, literally hair falling out in clumps, excessive hair growth in the weirdest places, which for a woman is just the worst thing possible. There can also be issues with sleep apnea, insomnia, loss of sex drive, anxiety, depression, and also just generally having a sense of a brain fog, you know, forgetfulness and things. So this is why, in order to improve the quality of life for people living with PCOS, I've brought together these experts. And today's expert is Sharon Van Wyk. Did I pronounce that properly?
Van Wyk, but yes, close enough.
You know, we Brits, if we see a letter there, we've got to pronounce Sharon Van Wyk. But before I hand over to her, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Sharon. Sharon is a 43-year-old wife and working mother of 2 adopted daughters. And this is after a 7-year struggle with infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss. She's also an active lifestyle and parenting blogger, and she won the category of Best Parenting Blog in the 2015 edition of African Blogger Awards. One of her passions is to offer support and encouragement to women walking a similar path of infertility, pregnancy loss, and adoption through her writing and her blog. She has been featured on numerous local TV talk shows, radio shows, and in print media, discussing her struggle and life after adoption. If you'd like to find out more about her, you can visit her site, which is www.theblessedbarrenness.co.za. You can also find her chatting over on Twitter, and her handle is @SharonVW, or on Facebook. If you look for The Blessed Barrenness, you'll find her there. The title of her talk today is What Nobody Warned Me About Regarding Adoption: Post-Adoption Depression Syndrome. And looking at the comments on your blog, so many women are glad that this topic's been talked about. But of course, when it happened to you, you had no idea what it was. Over to you, Sharon. Welcome. Could you tell us your story?
Thanks, Jimmy. Well, my husband and I started trying for a family almost immediately after we got married, because I was already 30 and we knew my biological clock was ticking. And fell pregnant on honeymoon, surprisingly. It was a big surprise. Came home from honeymoon, sick, landed up at the doctor, and, they kept saying I had an ear infection, or maybe I was getting the flu. And 2 weeks later, my doctor said, let's just do a pregnancy test. And of course, at that stage, it was the furthest thing from my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we were absolutely stunned to discover that I was pregnant. And unfortunately, we only knew for a few days, and then I had a miscarriage. I miscarried at 6 weeks.
Right.
It then took 14 months to fall pregnant again. Same pattern again. I cannot carry a pregnancy past 8 weeks. I carry between 6 and 8 weeks of pregnancy. So we had 4 miscarriages like that. Then we started seeking professional help. I've had every test known to mankind. We've had 2 surgeries. I've had an HSG x-ray, which is a very unpleasant x-ray for anybody that's ever been through infertility will tell you. I've had 4 artificial inseminations. We had 5 in vitro fertilizations. And over that period of time, from starting the journey to reaching the point where I said, that's it, I'm done, we fell pregnant and miscarried 7 times.
Wow.
My 7th miscarriage was after a frozen embryo transfer. And after that, when I just said to my husband, that's it, I'm done. I can't put myself through this anymore. My body can't take anymore. It's all those hormones, all those injections. I was finished. So, and at that stage, friends of ours had just adopted a little baby girl. And I kept looking at all their photos on Facebook and saying, I really believe this is the route that we should be going. Like, I don't want to do fertility treatments anymore. We do need assistance in falling pregnant and staying pregnant. So let's give it a bash. And we went through the screening process, and we did all the paperwork, and we got our police clearance and everything, and we're absolutely stunned when 3 weeks after we completed everything, we got the call to say that we'd been chosen by a birth mom and we were going to have a baby. And I really believed at that stage, naively, I really believed that I would be living my happily ever after, that I was going to get this child that I had longed for and worked for and yearned for more than 7 years by that stage. And my life was going to be perfect. And I'll never forget the day I realized something was up. Ava, my daughter, my oldest daughter, she must have been about 6 weeks old, and a colleague of mine came to visit me. And she walked into my house and she looked at me holding Ava and she said to me, "Oh, how's it going, Mommy?" And I know everybody expected that I would be overwhelmed with joy, and instead I looked at her and I wanted to burst into tears. I was desperately upset. I felt sick on the inside. I felt frozen. I felt overwhelmed. I was so incredibly anxious. And the overriding thought that I kept having was, how is this my life? this child that I've wanted for so long, and now I've got her, and now what am I doing? What am I doing? Why did I want this? And it was a slow slide from there. I just became, I guess the only word that I can really use is frozen. I became like an observer in my own life. I lacked enthusiasm for everything. I didn't sleep well, not that anybody ever does when they have a new baby. And I just really started to struggle. And we got to about, Eva must have been about 12 months old. And just before her first birthday, when my husband said to me, listen, I can't do this anymore. You need help. Like, something is seriously wrong with you. It had reached the point where I was so ridiculously overwhelmed that I couldn't even do the simplest of tasks. Like, I couldn't cook a meal. I couldn't make a cup of coffee. Everything just left me feeling paralyzed. And then add to that, with my long history with infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss, was this excessive guilt that came with it. And I'd been seeing a psychologist during the course of my infertility journey, and I decided to go back to her because she had, her speciality was women's issues and infertility and women's relations. And she says to me, well, have you ever heard of post-adoption depression or post-adoption depression syndrome? And I was like, no. And she said to me, well, do you know that up to between 25 to 40% of couples, and post-adoption depression doesn't just affect women, it can affect men too, can suffer with this form of depression. And I really think that you need to consider that potentially this is what you're dealing with. And so I started having some therapy with her, and she put me on some antidepressants, and it was the strangest thing because with literally in 3 weeks of starting the treatment and starting the medication, it was like being breathed back to life. I suddenly had energy again. I could experience I could experience joy in my child. Simple tasks I was able to complete again. And I think the biggest mistake that so many of us make is that we think that depression is sitting in a room and crying all the time when it's really not. It's for me, it's not being present in my own life. And post-adoption depression is, I think, further complicated by the fact that people that so often suffer with it have had a long and painful journey prior to going into that adoption journey. And that does compound the issue as well. You go into your adoption journey with the grief and the trauma from your infertility, and then you get this baby and everything comes crashing down on top of you.
Okay, yeah. You mentioned guilt in relation to what you got.
Guilt.
What about that guilt?
It was guilt on so many different levels for so many different things. I had become extreme as a blogger and as an oversharer. I had become very involved in the online infertility community in South Africa. So I was talking on a daily basis with women from all walks of life that were struggling with similar things to me. Some of them had recurrent pregnancy loss. Some of them had PCOS. Some of them had male factor infertility, but we were a community of women that walked this very painful journey together. And whenever was placed, I started to feel extremely guilty. Like, why me? Why am I the one that's having this baby that we all so desperately want? Why was I chosen to have this child? Why, and then also I'd become very close friends in real life with many of these women as well, and they were still struggling. They were still going through IVFs, and I was holding a baby. So I felt guilty about that. I felt guilty about the fact that I'd wanted this baby for so long, and I was feeling guilty about having it. Does that even make any sense? It was guilt on top of guilt on top of guilt. I felt guilty because I felt like I should be living my happily ever after, and my life should be fantastic because this is what I wanted, and this is what so many women are striving for. Now I've got it, and I can't enjoy it. I felt guilt. I felt guilty for, and this is, some people may think it's ridiculous. I felt guilty for our birth mother because I saw the pain and that she went through at placing her child, and I saw her grief, so I felt guilty for that. I felt guilty that I couldn't immerse myself in the joy of this child, knowing what her birth mother had sacrificed. So there were just so many elements of guilt that just paralyzed me completely.
Wow. Yeah. The birth mother, because it's strange. This is my first time actually of thinking about the birth mother.
Yes. Yes.
Are you still in touch with her? Or
we are. I've got 2 daughters. Both of them are adopted. Obviously, every adoption is different, and the circumstance surrounding each adoption is different. So, Ava's birth mom, Ava's my eldest daughter, who we still have contact with each other, and we do have a closed adoption, but obviously with society being the way it is today, with Facebook and Twitter and blogs, whatever, you can find anyone you want to find.
That is
and
true.
we sort of stumbled across each other online, and she'd been sending messages to the social worker. We used an amazing social worker. She's like part of our family now. And she'd been sending messages on Facebook to the social workers with beautiful little, love poems, whatever, saying this is for Sharon and for Ava. And I felt like that was her way of trying to reach out to me to say, I just want to know. I just want to know that she's okay. And so I'd send her a Facebook friend request and say to her, I know that if this is highly inappropriate, if it's not something you want to do, please ignore it. I won't be offended, but I feel like you are trying to reach out to me, and I want you to know that I'm okay with that. And that was about 4 years ago. Ava's 6 now. She lives in Cape Town, I'm in Johannesburg, so whenever we go down to Cape Town, my husband and I will go and have lunch with her. And Ava has started to ask a lot of questions about her. I mean, being 6, she's now very much aware of the fact that she is adopted and she has 2 mothers, and she started to ask if she can meet her, and so I've started speaking to her birth mother about that as well, and probably within the next year or so that meeting will happen. So we are very close with her. When I share photos of Ava on Facebook, I'll tag her in it so that she can see every day what's happening in Ava's life. Then Hannah's birth mom had a different situation, and the circumstances around her placement were quite different, so I don't have any contact with her. She will request an update from the social worker like 2 or 3 times a year on how Hannah's doing, and if we can send her a letter, and then I email the social worker with photos and they forward it on, but that's as far as that relationship goes. And I have to respect that she has her reasons for having it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's quite extraordinary that you're able to have that relationship with the birth mother, with Ava's birth mother. That is really extraordinary. And it shows that you must be a very balanced person. You don't sound to me like the kind of person that could be thought of as highly strung, or that's a very mature decision, even for a mature person to make. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. It's very interesting. Like, so many people are so surprised to hear of the relationship that we have with her. And I think before Ava was placed with us, I was very frightened of the birth mother. Before we knew we were even having Ava, I was terrified. I felt like this woman, whoever she would be, would have all the power, and we were going to be totally at her mercy because we so badly wanted this child. And I'll never forget the day that we met her. We met her the day before she gave birth to Ava, and I walked into the social worker's office, and Jimmy, it's the weirdest thing, we even look alike.
Wow.
There was a connection between her and I from the minute we laid eyes on each other. It felt like like we were spiritually connected. She was familiar in so many ways, in the way she spoke, even in her name. And it's just been a bond that I don't want to break. I want to have that contact with her. I think it's really important for Ava. I don't want ever feel guilty about wanting to know her and wanting to know where she comes from. And I feel it's forever. It's a beautiful gift that her two mothers can have this relationship and both be a part of her life and both be equally important in her life, even though we are playing such completely different roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when one really thinks about the process of adoption, because like you said just now, the idea of the birth mother holding all the power, and it has been known to happen, you know, that the birth mother may change her mind, or just be impossible or something could go wrong. So you speak about your social worker, and you speak of him or her. I'm assuming it's her.
A woman, yes.
Okay, then you speak of her in glowing terms.
Yes.
I assume you told her about the emotional journey you had afterwards.
I did, because we're still very close today. We still phone each other and chat and WhatsApp each other, and we're friends on Facebook, and she reads my blog, and she's always wanting to know how Ava's doing. And I approached her afterwards, and I said, like, when we went through the whole counseling process, and you took us through what to expect and everything, that's the one area that wasn't touched on, is the fact that there could be this, emotional trauma from our side as the adoptive parents. And mostly, and it's not just from her, it's from everybody that works sort of in that field, the comment was, well, that's really sort of a negative emotion. We don't like to dwell on the negative, which I understand. But I feel like I would have been potentially able to manage my situation better had I been able to recognize it sooner. And interestingly, I've got quite a few friends that have subsequently adopted themselves, and there's quite a few of them that went through a similar situation. And they at least had me, and they could come to me and say, I'm so depressed, I can't stop crying, I feel frozen in my life, I feel guilty because I really wanted this baby, but now I don't know how to live my life. And it was an honor for me to be able to say to them, it's okay, it's normal. And I've really, really begun to think, and this is completely in my unprofessional opinion, I've really begun to think, you compare post-adoption depression with postnatal depression. Mm-hmm. They're so very, very similar, the symptoms. The only difference is that
powerful.
They're very similar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. They're so incredibly similar. The only difference is that in post-adoption depression, you don't have the hormones, you don't have the giving birth of the baby. And I really start to wonder if, having a child, nobody can prepare you for what's that's going to be like. No matter how that baby comes to you, parenthood is hard. And I've really started to think that, depending on your own personal makeup and circumstances leading up to the placement or the birth of that child, impact on how you cope with it and what your coping skills are. And if you're already in a sort of depressive state or you've been in a difficult position, it is harder to deal with.
Yeah. And your husband, because you said it can affect men too.
Yes. So we had some interesting situations with my husband, but again, like, I don't know how much of that is adoption related and how much of that is new father related. But I remember with Ava, she must have been about 6 weeks old, and she had terrible colic, and her colic time was from 11 o'clock at night. So she would start screaming at 11 o'clock at night, and she could scream until 3 o'clock the next morning. And we were both exhausted and strung out and overwhelmed, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And this baby wouldn't stop crying and screaming. And I remember I was lying on our bed one night, and the tears were just rolling off my cheeks. And he was sitting on the floor. He had her in the pram, and he was sitting on the floor with his foot on the pram, just pushing the pram backwards and forwards. And he looked at me with his giant eyes, and he said to me, I think I was just not cut out for being a father. And that was when I realized that this was having a massive impact on him. Well, it's just having a new baby is a really hard thing to adapt to, irrespective of how that baby came to you. And it has knock-on effects with you and your partner.
Okay, yeah. So how about when Eva's sister? Because
Yes.
after this, you still obviously went through the adoption process again. So how much was taken into consideration of the post-adoption depression that you'd affected? It didn't affect things? Did it come up? Was it an issue?
It did come up, and it was something that we discussed with the social workers, and they sort of all said, well, it's a big deal, and you've been through one hell of a trauma prior to that, so it is to be expected, and it's okay. And Hannah's placement was very different from Ava's, and the circumstances around her placement were very different to Ava's. And I struggled. Maybe it was because I was able to recognize the depression or the symptoms of the post-adoption depression easier. So I knew when I was going into that spiral that I needed to get help. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that complicated with, the situation with Hannah was that I think, especially as a second child, I had an image in my mind of what I thought my second child would be, and naively just assumed that I was getting a cookie cut of what Ava was. And when I got the second child, and she was nothing like Ava, she was completely her own person, I battled to bond with her. And that compounded the effects of the guilt, and it started that little snowball reaction of the feeling frozen and paralyzed in my life and overwhelmed, and again went back to therapy, medication, and a few months, and it's all sort of normalized again.
Okay, yeah. You say that you were surprised that within 3 weeks you got the first placement with Ava.
Yes.
That's surprising. Is it?
Yes.
I mean, it does sound surprising to me. I mean, I don't have any experience with adoption, but was it just luck, or is it easy to adopt in South Africa?
It's not easy to adopt. I don't think adoption is easy anywhere, and it's not just the process, it's the emotions and everything that go behind adoption that just make it so very difficult, and all the extenuating circumstances that do make it. It's a difficult journey. It's a worthwhile journey, but it is a difficult one. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Ava's placement was just, it felt like fate. And I'll never forget the day we were finishing up our screening with our social worker, and she sat back in her chair and she said to my husband and I, she said, I've been doing this for 35 years. And myself and my partner, we know our birth parents and we know our adoptive parents so well that we take bets with each other because we know exactly which adoptive parents a birth parent is going to choose. I've just been doing this so long. And she said, I've got a gut instinct about you. And yeah. It was this thing. 4 days later, she phoned me back and she said, remember what I said in my office? And I said to her, yes. And she said to me, so I have a birth mom that I'm in the process of screening. And she's seen all the profiles and there's just nobody. She's battling to make a decision. There's nobody that's really jumping out for her. I'm seeing her on Saturday and I want your profile. I want to show her your profile. So my husband and I spent a sleepless night that Wednesday night throwing together. I mean, this is a book of your life. This is a book selling yourself to say, this is who we are and this is why you should choose us.
Am I worthy?
Yes, and so it's a big deal. And I spent that whole night crying my eyes out and absolutely overwhelmed and in tears because this book has to be perfect, and how are we going to make it perfect in like 12 hours? Anyway, we got it done, sent it off, and then we heard nothing for 2 weeks. And I was, it was coming up to Christmas time, and my husband said to me, let's just take it easy. Let's just take a step back. Christmas is coming. We're going away for the holidays. Let's just have a great holiday. Let's have a blast with our friends, and we'll worry about it in the new year. And a week later, I was sitting at work at my desk and I got a phone call, and I saw it was the social worker, and I answered the phone, and she was like, can you come to Cape Town? And I was like, well, why? She's like, well, no, you've been chosen by birth mom. I was like, what? Like, it's only been 2 weeks since we gave you the profile. It's only been 3 weeks. I said, so when's the baby due? She was like, no, next week, Thursday. So we flew down to Cape Town that Friday. We met our birth mum on the Saturday. And on the Sunday morning, the first social worker phoned us at 6 a.m. and said, just stay calm, don't panic, have something to eat, get showered, get dressed, come to the hospital. She's in labor.
Wow.
So there you go. 3 weeks from screening to birth of a baby. We literally flew to Cape Town for that meeting with an overnight bag. Mm-hmm. And we flew back with prams and ham cots and a baby and 3 extra suitcases of luggage. And it was, yeah, my head spun. I mean, I'll never forget the day we got home from the hospital with Ava. My parents live in Cape Town, so we'd been staying with them. And we walked in, and my mom and my dad were just in love with this tiny little baby. And my mom was holding, and she looked up and she said, so when must she have her next bottle? I don't know.
Wow.
Okay, well, how much formula must she have? I don't know. She's like, well, do you know how to mix the formula? No. I mean, we literally were green. We knew nothing. We arrived in Cape Town on that Friday. On the Saturday before we met the social worker, we went and she said, go and do some baby shopping. You need at least a hospital bag. And yeah, it's just, it happened so fast. My head spun. We arrived back in Joburg with a 5-day-old baby. No baby room, no nothing. We were completely unprepared. So yeah, it's quite an amazing story. It's certainly not the norm.
Yeah.
I mean, the Hannah, we waited 2 years. That's much more normal. Yeah. That's much more the average waiting that you can expect.
Yeah, but isn't it because one might think, well, maybe it was the speed with which it happened, and you not having the time to sort of have that transition
absolutely
one to the other. But like you said, you still had totally different set of circumstances with sister, but still recognize the signs of depression coming again. So one can't really blame the speed. It probably didn't help, but I don't sense that one can blame it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's so much the speed at which it happened. The other thing is that I just had my last miscarriage. So Ava's birthday is the 13th of December. Literally 1st of November, not November, 1st of October of that year, my miscarriage was confirmed. Right. So we went from a miscarriage to screening to taking home a baby in like 2.5 months, which also it's a lot, dealing with a miscarriage, dealing with the emotions of a miscarriage and the grief. That's not an easy process to go through either. And my head was still spinning from that. And I was holding a newborn baby. I was somebody's mom.
Mm-hmm. Another mother had lost her baby in order for you to be a mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Prior to all this, had you ever been treated for anxiety or depression or had any kind of low?
I have a history of depression and generalized anxiety disorder, which obviously also would have played a part in all of this. But the thing is, especially with the experience that I have from the friends that I made in the infertility community, depression is not an uncommon condition for infertile women to struggle with, and the longer you're on that journey, the more prevalent it becomes.
So considering, do you think, has anything changed? So you've been on this campaign to raise awareness of post-adoption depression. Has anything changed? Because, for example, I'm sort of sitting here and thinking to myself that considering the number of miscarriages you'd had, considering how recent the last one was, could something have been done in terms of like preemptive therapy have been provided? Even if they didn't want to dwell on it, would that have helped?
I'm sure it would have. I'm really, today in preparation for my chat with you, I actually went online and did a little bit of research and read up on post-adoption depression for other people's experiences. And what was interesting for me is that in terms of South Africa, it does not feature at all. I found lots of resource websites for American adoptive families, and I found lots of resources for adoptive families in the UK, but almost nothing mentioned aside from my blog for South African families.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still not really sure that it's recognized the way that it should be here. And I think that the biggest thing is, especially from family and friends, is that everybody expects that this is this thing that you've wanted for so very long, and now you live in your dream and everything's perfect. And as a mature adult, there's no such thing as happily ever after. Life continues to happen and curveballs continue to come your way. And irrespective of the fact that, yes, that my infertility journey came to an end and I became a mother, which is the thing that I'd been struggling with or striving for so many years. But then life continued and I had new challenges to face and new things to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you do aside from blogging? Because you do also have a career.
Yes. I actually work for a local gaming company. We have the licenses to import all Ubisoft, Activision games into South Africa. So we distribute into the retail market. I'm an account manager for them.
Okay.
And so that's also quite an interesting job. And then my blogging is a side project. It's my hobby and it's my passion, and it's been my creative outlet for so many years.
Well, did you start? At what point did you start blogging? Was it something you would have done anyway, or was it the infertility journey or the adoption? When did it start, the blogging?
It started in the middle of my infertility journey. I'll be completely honest with you. It started because so many of my friends from the infertility support forums were all writing blogs, and I thought, well, hey, maybe I should write a blog too. And it just became such a cathartic experience to be able to go onto my little place on the web and just purge those emotions and the pain, the emotional trauma that I was experiencing, and to be able to put that into words and put it on a page somewhere, and to have other women come and read it and say, I feel the same way, or this is what's happened to me, or have you tried that treatment? And I felt validated. I felt my emotions were validated through my blog. And then, Eva was placed, and by that stage I'd been blogging for 2 years. And it's become such a passion and a hobby. It's just something I can't imagine not doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just had a brainstorming there. So, do you think you're going to adopt again?
No. No. Two children are enough, thank you. No, 2's enough. I'm done. I'm also 44 in a couple of months, so no, I'm finished. Done.
You said you did some research to prepare for this. What else did you come across?
So no, I was just looking up on, what other resources, online resources and that sort of thing had said about what the symptoms of post-adoption depression are and what the prevalence is, and studies that are done. And the symptoms are pretty much spot on. Overwhelming guilt, feeling overwhelmed, having sleep problems, eating problems, overeating, undereating, anxiety, a lack of joy, feeling very tearful. Pretty much what I experienced is what they were saying there. And then the other interesting statistic was that in focus groups that they'd done in couples that had adopted, it's between 25 and 40% will struggle with this and not know and think that they're being ungrateful, or that there's something wrong with them, that they can't embrace this time in their life, and instead they're overwhelmed by sadness and guilt.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's got to be the hardest part too. It's very much, I remember when we were kids, it was my brother's birthday, and we went somewhere and some family friend had a present for him and gave him the present, and he opened it and he didn't like the present. I think I was probably 6 at the time, and so that was about 5 years old. He opened the present, he didn't like it, and he started crying. And then innocently the grown-up said, "Why is he crying?" And I piped up, "He doesn't like his present." And I got told off for it. And so that was my first introduction to the whole thing of showing gratitude, even when you're not feeling it.
Yes.
And so yeah, that's it's what we're brought up in life to show gratitude.
Yes.
For a gift.
And the other thing that was quite interesting for me was with both Eva and with Hannah's placements, at the same time I had friends that were giving birth to their own biological children. And the interesting thing is that, and I've seen it not just with myself, but with other friends that have adopted, couples that adopt their babies are not, or they're not received in the same way. And I'm not being negative when I say that. But, for example, when you have a friend that has a new baby and she comes home from the hospital, you cook her a meal and you go and you ask, "Can I do your shopping?" and that sort of thing. And adoptive couples very rarely get that kind of support. I mean, I didn't get it with either of my children. And at the time, I remember looking at friends of mine that had given birth, and they were having meals cooked for them and, being treated so cautiously and carefully, because it is such a hard time and it is such a hard adjustment. And I think it's because people maybe misconstrue or believe that because adoption is such a planned, premeditated process, it's not like, "Oh, whoopsie, I'm pregnant, having a baby." I think that people almost automatically assume that we're somehow better prepared or more ready for it because it's something that we've planned so very, very carefully. When in reality, it's just really not. It's just as hard. Whether you've given birth or not, having a new baby is hard. I never want to do it again, ever.
This is not the first time a friend of mine adopted. Her daughter was was older than that. She was not a baby when she adopted her. But she did say that she felt she got no support, in fact, zero support from her family at the time. And the whole thing of babysitting and this and that. Quite right. There's an acknowledgement of a very important rite of passage when a person gives birth. But when a person just sort of like turns up with a baby, people kind of feel like, well, you've just sort of like ordered a baby online.
It was, and for the longest time I felt almost guilty by even thinking that, like, I'm being so ungrateful because at the end of the day, I did get a baby, but, it would have been nice on those days whenever it screamed for 6 hours straight at night and I was just frazzled and exhausted and hadn't brushed my teeth or washed my hair in 3 days. It just would have been nice if somebody had come and said, "Sit down. Here is a bowl of spaghetti. Sit down, relax. Let me hold your baby for you." And it's exactly as you say. It's like, it's just treated differently. And I don't think it's callous. I don't think there's any malicious intent or anything in that. It's just, it's seen as two such very different, well, they are scenarios of coming to family creation.
I personally am taking something from this interview, that if I know anyone in future who's going through adoption or has gone through it, I need to make an effort to acknowledge it in the same way I would acknowledge if they gave birth to that child themselves. And I suppose anyone watching this might also gain that as well. To a little bit of a song and dance about it to acknowledge that something happened. Because my sister's just got a cat, a 3-year-old cat. We're quite. I think we've all gone round to see her, and it's like a new member of the family.
Definitely.
but it's not the same, adopting a cat and adopting a, but
but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, that if we had sort of acted like, oh well, yeah, big deal, there's a cat.
Yeah.
There's something. It's a new person a new creature that she's got to look after and do things for. But I've learned a lot from this interview, and I hope that I've learned to be a bit more sensitive and not just assume that just because a person hasn't given birth to a child, it's any less of a thing. I would never have thought of the screaming nights, for example.
Yes. Yeah, the needs are the same. The needs of a new mom are the same, irrespective of how she became that or how she came to be that new mom. She needs the same support and the same encouragement and the same words of advice. And irrespective of whether she gave birth naturally, had a C-section, or adopted a baby, it's exactly the same.
Yeah. Do you think it would have made a difference if people had sort of like maybe a baby shower for you, because you came up with a 5-day-old baby, a baby shower? And
I did have a shower,
okay,
but I'd told my friends, I'm not sure how it works over there, but the way that the adoption law works here is that the birth parents have a 60-day consent period. So they sign the first relinquishment forms, and then they have 60 days to retract. And that 60 days was the most terrifying 60 days of my life. Every time my phone rang, I was convinced it was the social worker calling to say, birth mom's changed her mind and you need to bring the baby back. So I'd made my friends, it was, and the anxiety of that, I am convinced, played a part in my depression, my post-adoption depression as well. So I'd told all of my friends, I don't want a baby shower. We'll wait until after the consent. Once the consent period is passed and all the legal steps have been followed, then you can throw me a shower. So I had a welcome baby shower forever when she was about 2.5 months old.
Yeah, wow, yeah. Well, this is such a fascinating subject. Thank you for sharing. Do you have a final message to adopted mothers out there and fathers?
I have a message for couples that are still struggling.
Right.
And I just want to say that everything that you read online tells you that adoption is hard. And it is hard, but it is so, so worth it.
Yeah, okay. Well, on that note, Sharon, thank you so much. Sharon, as we've mentioned here, has a blog. If you're affected by this, if you're touched by this, if you're interested in finding out more, it is again www.theblessedbarrenness.co.za. It's all one word. I won't spell it out for you, but you'll find it on the Summit website, where to link. And you can also subscribe so you receive updates for each blog she writes. Thank you for your time. A kiss for both the girls,
Thank you.
And a big hug for your husband, long-suffering dude that he is. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And yes, if anybody needs advice, you're always happy to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
To hear from people and encourage people. Wherever you are in the world, you've heard her message. Thank you.